The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay. All right. So I guess I will give it one more minute to let people file in. So we'll be starting the webinar soon.
I suggest everybody get a fresh cup of coffee.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us for today's webinar on commissioning and retro-commissioning energy savings for new and existing buildings. My name is Lauren Smith and I'm a program associate with the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project in the Buildings Efficiency Program. And I will be your host for today's webinar. So just a little bit about our organization. So this webinar is brought to you by SWEEP and the Western Cooling Efficiency Center. And SWEEP is an organization that promotes energy efficiency in a 6-state region. And in the Buildings Efficiency Program, we do a lot of work related to energy codes and also above code programs. SWEEP also works with regional utilities on demand-side management and other programs. The Western Cooling Efficiency Center, their mission is to forward the innovation and application of technologies and programs that reduce electrical demand and energy and water consumption for cooling in the western United States. So if you're interested, you can check out some of our recent publications at the links listed here. For SWEEP, our transportation team recently completed a report entitled Transportation Fuels for the Southwest, Life Cycle Energy Use and Environmental Impacts of Electric, CNG, and Gas Vehicles. This report compares the life cycle energy use and emissions from gasoline, compressed natural gas, and electric vehicles. And it provides information on which vehicle type is cleanest today and in the future for states in the Southwest. And for the Western Cooling Efficiency Center, you can also download their latest report, and it's on evaporative pre-cooler retrofits. This report was sponsored by the Energy Commission and the Statewide Partnership for Energy Efficiency Demonstration, and it looks at the efficacy and economics of a condenser pre-cooler retrofit by a VaporCool on a 50-ton chiller in California. It also lays out the cost and potential payback for this type of system in different scenarios, so it gives facility managers a tool to estimate costs and savings. And on a logistical note, there are 2 ways to ask questions during the webinar. You can write your question in the comment box during the session or after the presentation, or you can also use the raised hand function. So for raising your hand, you just press the little hand button, and then I can unmute you to ask a question. For the purposes of this webinar, we ask that you hold your questions until the end of the presentation, where we have some time allocated for Q&A. And our upcoming webinar in December, we have not yet decided on our topic, so we will be sending out a poll to you guys to get your feedback on which topics you'd find useful. A few topics that we're thinking of are DOE's Building Performance Database, and that is an anonymous database of commercial and residential building data. It's a new DOE initiative. And some other potential topics include lighting and lighting controls and geothermal. So our speaker today is Richard Farkas, and he's from Dynamic Commissioning Solutions, Inc. and Prometrics Worldwide. He has 32 years of experience in the industry and was a founding member of the Building Commissioning Association. He has also authored a large part of the retrocommissioning standard in use today. And also, here is our contact information in case you have questions or comments. You can also visit our websites listed below if you'd like to learn more about our respective organizations. And also, we'll be sending out a PDF of the PowerPoint that we're presenting today, so you can have that as well. And now I will transition over to Richard, who will present on today's topic.
Thank you, Lauren, and good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have a lot of information to cover today, and as Lauren had pointed out, we have available to you the PDF version of the presentation. What's most important here, is that you just relax and take in the information, because it is an awful lot to take in one shot. And my focus, as with any presentations I do, are practicality and the information being meaningful and useful. So the way the presentation is set up, will follow effectively this overview format. Lauren had already performed the introductions. The commissioning is going to be global, and then we'll go into the retrocommissioning, and I'll provide some links and resources. What's most important to me is the opportunity for everybody to be able to ask questions with respect to experiences, common experiences, and pitfalls. Effectively, I think the most critical issue to start with is, what is the definition? Because we could go through the logistics of commissioning a project or retrocommissioning and sometimes lose sight of what is the aim and objective. And as you see on the bottom of this slide, I reference Dr. Evan Mills. He authored a white paper, basically, that says a golden opportunity for reducing energy costs and greenhouse gas emissions. I provided the link. Dr. Mills with the Lawrence Berkeley Institute has, to my knowledge, the most extensive literature, statistical information on the efficacy of commissioning and retrocommissioning, costs, advantages, and in his estimation, his conclusion, commissioning produces or yields the highest ROI of any sustainable concept, so or strategy. So, I want to share my resources as well. Also, for future reference, I'm sharing with you links. Several years ago, many years ago, we created a series of online videos for commissioning and retrocommissioning, and these are links. It's about 2.5 minutes long, so very brief. You're certainly, with the information we're going to share today, is much more in depth, but sometimes people just want a snapshot of what the commissioning is. One of the things I also wanted to share, there's some serious developments that I think I should preface this whole session with, and that is that codes, there are various codes that are mandating commissioning, and I'm going to share a couple of them with you. IECC is, in effect, throughout the country, and particularly 408, Section 408 of the code, and also Title 24, the California's Energy Code. And I'll have to correct this. Somehow it pulled up, a different link, so I will be sure to correct that link. But also, regarding lead V4 enhanced commissioning, it's now going to be worth 6 points. As many of you may know, from version 2.2, it was 1 point, and version 3 went to 2 points. Now it's 6. So you could see this concept of commissioning really gaining tremendous momentum. One of the things that I see as an issue is the enforcement really hasn't come into effect. And you know, I'm already getting questions about should that be the authorities having jurisdictions responsibility or the contractors? I can't get in the middle of that. You know, it's like the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg? All I could say is, here's a code and it's enforceable. Please be aware of the requirements. Takeaways. One of the things that we need to talk about and in the development of this presentation is how commissioning and retrocommissioning, the abbreviation RCX, can reduce heating and cooling loads. You have to understand, fundamentally, commissioning came about because of the issues that were experienced not only in design but ultimately during occupancy about the electromechanical systems not working. The process in its conception and approach were intended to address those issues. It's been expanded since to include other facets of the building. For example, building envelope, which is absolutely, you know, a significant consideration. But you know, when we talk about that, sometimes people are looking for a punchline to say, well, the cooling, how are we going to do that? Within the context of this presentation, we haven't got enough time to really go into the details, so we're looking more at the process and the overview. And essentially what we're trying to accomplish or achieve at the end of the day is a facility that is performing in accordance with the owner's project requirements, and that follows the ASHRAE definition, the OPR, or design intent, as well as LEED. Common issues, team engagement, and the ongoing process. Ultimately, it's great that we're spending this effort. It's great that we're spending the money, but ultimately we have to consider maintaining that investment. And from a utility standpoint, you know, as we all know, you know, to expand the facilities, you know, power generation, transmission, and distribution, it's extremely expensive and an incredible undertaking. So we know at the user end, we could make huge advances by being more efficient, and not only is it economically responsible, it's environmentally responsible. Just going to leave this quote at the bottom. You know, again, you know, these slides will be made available to you, but this statistic is fantastic. Projects employing comprehensive approach to commissioning attain nearly twice the overall median level of savings and 5 times the savings of projects with a constrained approach. And again, I share with you the reference. Dr. Mills is a wealth of statistical information. So, as I said with item 1, how can we reduce cooling and heating loads in buildings? Well, the process addresses those issues in a systematic manner. So we'll go into the definitions. And, you know, basically this slide, you know, reiterates more or less what I just said, you know, looking at the selection of equipment, the building usage and ratings, ultimately looking at the you know, overlays, the traditional overlays. You know, you don't want to have a chiller there and no electrical connection to it. These are the kind of constructability issues that we look at during design. One of the critical points to share is during the design, there seems to be a lot of confusion, even with a lot of commissioning companies, as to what the purpose of the design phase review is. And I'll throw this out because the Title 24 requirement for design phase reviews, from a commissioning perspective, it is not intended to be a peer review per se. What it is basically from the document, the OPR, the narrative that articulates the owner's project requirements, we're looking at a mid-construction phase design to make sure those elements make it into the drawings. And of course, we do a second review prior to the issuance of the documents to make sure our comments were picked up. The point was to make sure that that progression of the owner's project requirements are carried into the drawings. Why is that important? Many people look at the, you know, from a peer review, are the sheet notes accounted for, and you know, is this integrated, which is wonderful stuff. But it fundamentally misses the point to say, is the owner's project requirements incorporated? So that's a critical point. And again, to start off, we need to know what the correct terminology is. CX is the abbreviation for commissioning, and commissioning refers to new facilities. So we need to be clear about that, because I've had owners approach me and say, I need a proposal to do commissioning of an existing building. Well, that's not the correct term. Retrocommissioning is going back into a building and evaluating the building and its performance, and it's an existing building that hasn't been commissioned before. Recommissioning also applies to an existing facility, and it means, you know, redoing again. And then there's ongoing commissioning, which is basically a continuation. And monitoring-based commissioning is basically, think of it like using the DDC system as something meaningful. I say that historically many building operators more or less use it as an idiot light. For example, when your car overheats, the light comes on and, you know, tells you you have a catastrophic event either pending or happening. The DDC systems, if they're set up properly, can accumulate a tremendous amount of meaningful information. You could see from your increased current curves, maybe your bearings are failing on you know, a large motor. There's a lot of very powerful information, and I think we can do much more to utilize that information. The analog from a utility perspective is the SCADA system. This is critically important here to start with from commissioning. There are a variety of definitions out there. Being a charter member of the Building Commissioning Association, a former board member, I can tell you that it was predicated on ASHRAE standards, and ASHRAE did a phenomenal job. In fact, a couple of the board members were ASHRAE board members. So although you have this slide in front of you, I think it's important from a rote perspective to reiterate. The basic purpose of building commissioning is to provide documented confirmation that building systems function in accordance with the criteria set forth in the project documents, so the drawings and specs, to satisfy the owner's operational needs. Okay, documented confirmation. And before I go on with this, let me explain what that means so far versus the misunderstanding in industry. Basically, the commissioning authority is proctoring, leading the process. It's not the commissioning authority's responsibility to replace the due diligence of the engineer or the architect or the contractor in respective subs and be the punch list guys, okay, the punch list team. And unfortunately, that's what happens in a lot of cases. And then, you know, because people haven't done their due diligence, there's the expectation that when things aren't working, you know, the commissioning authority has to untangle it. This is why this definition is so critically important. Doesn't matter what people think it is, this is the definition. So, you know, I want to reiterate that. Commissioning of existing systems may require the development of new functional criteria in order to address the owner's current system's performance requirements. So what we're saying is there's an understanding that buildings change, utilization changes. For example, we can have a conference room that's subdivided into offices. Now all of a sudden you've affected the airflow. People are uncomfortable, or you put heat-producing equipment in the room, and now you're burdening the system. There's any number of possibilities of things that could happen, but that's what that's referring to. So this definition is based on the critical understanding that the owner must have some means of verifying that their functional needs are rigorously addressed during design, construction, and acceptance. So again, you know, a big takeaway is understanding what commissioning is. So we go through the definitions in more detail here. Retro-commissioning, I would say, since we're going to provide the PDFs to you, I don't want to burden it anymore at this time. I would say suffice it to say the retro-commissioning applies to the existing building, and recommissioning does as well. Retro means going back, hadn't been commissioned before, recommissioning, doing it again. Ultimately, the focus also for commissioning or retro-commissioning, recommissioning, the documentation that's produced is intended to make its way to the O&M staff so they could use that as a living document to operate and maintain the building. So in the next series of slides, we're going to talk about why is commissioning important and get into the process. And the commissioned systems typically lead, and the IECC 2012 Section 408 references these systems, the following systems. Does that mean that that's all we can do? No, in my opinion, and I'll share this in more detail. I think it's an issue that the electrical distribution system doesn't receive far more attention. I've seen major grounding issues, bonding issues, fusing issues, fuses incorrect, thermal overloads, incorrect. And of course, ultimately, there's the talk about how much does it cost, okay? And we'll get to that. And I encourage you to, at the end of the presentation, to log any questions, and please, I'm here for you. So I encourage you to ask questions from experience. I'd be happy to share that. Pitfalls, common things to watch out for. I'll give you the good, bad, and the ugly. So why is it important? First of all, it's a structured approach. Many projects, the owners and even the AE team will say, yeah, we commission the projects. Not exactly. Because the commissioning, unless they're following a structured approach to document it, yeah, that's not commissioning. And in fact, in many projects, you'll see on a construction schedule that commissioning happens in a day. The schedule shows the critical path, and commissioning happens here. That is an unbelievable mistake, because as we'll see, the commissioning is a process, not an event. And ideally, it starts at the conceptual phase of the project. It works. It's proven to work. And I can tell you from our standpoint, the statistics say that the payback, so in other words, a benefit cost ratio unity is, is unity, so 1.2 years. The lowest ROI we've experienced in the many years that we've been doing it was a 400% ROI. Certainly on more complex and larger projects, we have more potential to realize a higher ROI. But I'll give you, for example, a statistic. On a 70,000 square foot elementary school with a 4-pipe central plant, okay, where we've done the electromechanical systems, in other words, the mechanical associated DDC, plumbing, electrical distribution, and lighting, we would log, and this is just in the functional, the construction phase, not even design, approximately 400 issues. Okay, let's put this in perspective. In '93, we did a study while I was with Fleur Daniel. An RFI, by the time it was generated in the field to the time it was responded, was about $1,500. So if you use just a thumbnail approach, 1,500 times 400, that's a considerable number, but what we're talking about, that was an RFI. How many of these issues have ramifications that are thousands of dollars, or potential damage, or an owner doesn't catch these issues for years, and the economic impact from that. So those are the kinds of statistics I could share personally. This slide shows basically the 8 primary functions of commissioning or steps of commissioning. And what you see actually here is in the construction phase. This is typically where contractors say the commissioning occurs. As you can see, it's much more involved than that. So the critical understanding as to what commissioning consists of is enormous. ASHRAE and LEED. The ASHRAE doesn't make the distinction that LEED does. ASHRAE basically says commissioning consists of fundamental and enhanced. The components. It does not break it out to say fundamental commissioning EA prerequisite is X and enhanced commissioning is Y. So that's an important consideration. And as I said, commissioned systems, generally the codes, and because of LEED, many owners think that that's all it's limited to. Well, that's all code says. That doesn't say that you can't do fire life safety systems. So, obviously, one of the questions, or logical questions I would ask is, so what equipment and systems require commissioning? So those systems can include the following. The electrical distribution. As I said earlier, I recently did a project. It was a small project, $11 million. The building was demolished. The existing feeders were going to be used. The existing feeders did not pass the Megger test. In fact, they failed miserably, and the service entrance conductors were full of water. I'm surprised there wasn't a catastrophic failure. I didn't look at the short circuit coordination study or any arc flash, but it had gone through the entire system. Everybody, the engineer reviewed it, the owner reviewed it, inspectors reviewed it. Nobody caught that, they got the NETA test report. Nobody looked at it. I looked through it and I said, whoa, we have a terrible problem. Ultimately, because of the age of the feeders and whatnot, the decision was made to replace it. But what do you think the ramifications would have been, had they not had commissioning, nobody would have looked at that. And that feeder and conduit went directly under the building to feed an existing building, and they went ahead and constructed this $11 million building right over. Yeah, that would have been extremely expensive to correct. So we talk about you know, the electrical distribution, and of course, you know, life safety, fire sprinkler, alarm systems, and you know, leave it to your imagination. So it's really based on need. So we'll talk about the benefits of commissioning as well. And here's some of the savings right off the bat. Dramatic reduction in change orders. So in other words, we spend the time to look at, you know, the logistics and, you know, the coordination. We all know that change orders, you know, can be very expensive. So it stands to reason to try and reduce that. Take the time to not only make sure the drawings are documented in advance. Oh, we're lost there. But you know, the subsequent RFIs and the confusion impacts the schedule, critical path. So ultimately, again, you know, owners want to have a functional building from day one, and you have the documentation to demonstrate that, and that also plays into comfortable and happy occupants who are productive. So energy savings potential. So again, we go back. You know, ASHRAE took the initiative to produce this because, you know, the standards for commissioning, because they recognized buildings were designed and they were constructed, and I've walked onto projects where I haven't seen code books, I haven't seen specifications. So, you know, the question is, how does that achieve the owner's project requirements? It's like somewhere in the project, a miracle occurs, you know. So the commissioning is a process, and again, since it is a process, if the team members don't follow the process, you could have an epic commissioning authority on the project trying to lead it. If nobody's listening, that could be a problem. I'm going to pick this up much faster because we still have a tremendous amount to cover. So, you know, about the electrical portion, feeders, terminations, grounding, fusing. So, punchline, from my experience, huge savings, obviously, in lighting retrofits. In TAB, we've seen serious duct leakage issues, duct work that's been disconnected, control sequences that don't work. So, you know, I'm telling you, you know, in a global sense, this is where we see huge issues. Don't disregard the electrical. I'll share this real quick. 80% of fuses, from my experience, and approximately 80% of thermal overloads on projects I've seen over many years were wrong. How did that happen? During construction, people slap in fuses just to do the startup and never go back. So think about that standard. Also doing startup, thermal overloads, the installer will experience some issues and say, well, we just turn them up. Well, you know, look at the code. Now you're exposing the equipment to potential damage. It was tripping the thermal overload because there was a problem. So cost. I can tell you, let's look at cost real quick. GSA has some information. You know, I don't like numbers being thrown around because, you know, let's say they say the statistics, 100,000 square foot building, $1 a square foot, 25 cents a square foot for the enhanced commission. These, what's the basis? You know, would you say 100,000 square foot process facility has the same logistics or complexity as a warehouse? Certainly not. And that's why I say, you know, I see numbers being thrown around indiscriminately. You know, So I think that that's something to consider. And there are statistics that say commissioning can range from 0.5% to 1.5% or more of total construction. There's a whole bunch of statistics. But I encourage you to really look at value. You know, cost really means nothing. If I say a car, for example, is $10,000 and it's a clunker up on block with no wheels and no motor, yeah, that's not a bargain. But if we're talking you know, a '68 Corvette in mint condition, obviously you say, whoa, that's quite a deal. So I think when we're talking about, you know, anything, look at value, not price alone. So, you know, again, you know, there's numbers floating all over the place, but you know, think about the level of effort, you know, especially when comparing quotes. We get into the retro-commissioning. I think this slide was humorous because sometimes things start off to be a good idea and they didn't work out so well after the fact. The upper left to young boys getting on a roller coaster. Obviously, we could see the one reaction. The boy on the right didn't realize what he was getting into. In the bottom right, the boys licking the flagpole on a cold day probably seemed a good idea when they were talking amongst themselves, and except for the guy who actually did it. And of course, Tiger, our friend Tiger, not a good idea. I won't go into details there. But also, I thought this was great because the expressions here really seem to describe cast of characters on just about, you know, every project I've ever done. There's, on the left, we have the expression of a key player that is just taken by surprise, as you know, that anticipating look of doom. Of course, we've got the cast of characters in the middle that will go along with the program regardless of what it is. And how many superintendents have we seen that look like that on the right, always high-strung? So it's really important, you know, to have capable people. That's why I say don't ask just anybody. Ask an expert. You know, it's all about the right choices, the right people, the right processes. That goes with commissioning, retro-commissioning, or anything in life for that matter. So what is retro-commissioning? Let's go back to that. It's basically going back and evaluating an existing building, and the process is not the same as commissioning, as we saw the 8 steps. And you know, again, I apologize that we didn't have time to go through the details of what that is. We're going to focus on retro here and hit the salient points. But retro commissioning ultimately is sets out to accomplish this same thing. It just has a different approach. We have the logistics of dealing with an occupied building and something that's already constructed as opposed to going to be. And again, the critical understanding is ultimately that this information be transmitted to the O&M staff. They're critical. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to go through the rigors and produce this great information, and it winds up on a shelf or some CD tucked in the bottom of a filing cabinet. So, oh, we went right over it. So again, we talk about commercial buildings frequently undergoing changes. What we have seen, and I'll talk about this from commissioning to retro-commissioning, with respect to DDC systems, we turn it over to the O&M staff, and sometimes the owner doesn't have the staff at the time in place, and they'll come in later, you know, as they start to assemble the staff, and the people aren't adequately trained. They'll start to play with the DDC control system and disconnect wiring, and try and manually manipulate a system that has hundreds, if not thousands, of lines of code that you know, they're going to try and overrun. So the point is, the systems, you know, it's unfortunate we go through tuning this stuff up, getting it working, and shortly thereafter, you know, it's played with, and you know, there goes the money and effort right out the window. So I'll share another interesting statistic, that approximately 3% of buildings in the U.S. are commissioned. It's extremely low. The statistics in Canada are reported in the neighborhood of as much as 100%, up in that range. So clearly, we have a long way to go, and with respect to you know, the economy, we can say that certainly construction slowed down. We're looking at some delayed maintenance programs that were dismantled altogether. So I see this being a huge issue. So, you know, look at as-builts, O&M's, training, maintenance programs, PM programs. So what are the benefits of commissioning, retro-commissioning? Well, it's very much same as you know, commissioning. The objectives are the same. I like the slides because peace, serenity, it's peace of mind, really. You know, to have a team come in and systematically go through, and you could you know, have it subcontracted to a commissioning company. Well, my suggestion, and this is my preference, is to work with the O&M team, the maintenance team, and engage them, and more or less proctor the program. So I find that to be very effective and meaningful for everybody. So here's some of the benefits: improved system operation, improved equipment performance. You know, really, ultimately, what we're looking at is predictability, reliability, and maintainability. At the end of the day, consider a casino. You know, when you have the whales are the big spenders. They come in, and you have a catastrophic failure, and the casino starts to approach 100 degrees inside. What do you think is going to happen to these people? You know, they're going to leave. So obviously, occupant comfort. So, you know, from an owner's standpoint, you know, to certainly have a building you can rely on to make sure the facility is functioning for its intended purpose. Here's some more cost data. And as you see, total retro-commissioning cost here from 13 cents to 45 cents, you know, a square foot. Again, I'm sharing, you know, statistics, and you could find this stuff all over the internet, provided here because these are common questions. But again, I, you know, implore people to say, don't be so fixated on cost. Understand what is that cost associated with, okay? And I'll make another critical point, because with the utilities, for example, there are all sorts of rebates, and energy audits are an issue. Here's one of the things to consider. With energy audits, we have class ASHRAE level 1, 2, and 3. The deliverable of an energy audit is a report. Okay. Now, it focuses on, the financial aspects of, identifying ECMs, energy conservation measures, and implementing them. But, the wheels fall off when it comes to the implementation phase. And that's why I say maybe a fusion of an energy audit, to satisfy the bean counters, to say, okay, here's the costs, and, I understand that. Retrocommissioning is that process that focuses on the, identifying what the issues are and fixing them. So you could do a fusion of the two processes. So just something to consider, because I've had issues with owners saying they want a level 1 audit. They know there's issues and they want them fixed. I said, you do know the intent of an ASHRAE 1 is basically to explore whether there's enough substance to go for an ASHRAE level 2. Your deliverable is a report. Nothing will be fixed. So, it's important owners understand. In a nutshell, this is the process, okay? The planning, the scoping, So in other words, you're trying to determine what is the owner's ultimate need here? What's their budget? What are they wanting to cover? And then, of course, the investigation phase to look at the systems and procure information, tab reports, needed testing reports. At that particular point, now we're talking about having a laundry list of items and determining first where's the low-hanging fruit, what are the no-cost, low-cost issues, and then we go from there. But think about the logistics and the implementation phase. That's why it's important. Now that you've identified the issues, now what? Unfortunately, too often, I see the process start, and those considerations were never addressed in the planning or scoping phase, and I think that's a big mistake, because that could stall a project for a long time. And of course, consider, the continuous implementation or persistence phase. In other words, now you've, tuned the building. What are you doing to maintain that investment? So in the next series of slides, project start, we talk about, an estimated duration. This is like thumbnail. Certainly there's a lot of assumptions in here. So then we talk about the planning phase, 2 to 4 weeks, and what that is. And again, meeting with the owner and establishing, documenting what do they want, because you don't want to get to the end of the project and you have a difference of understanding. So that's critical. The investigation phase. This is where you go into the project and actually see what's there, what was it designed to do, what's working, how old is it, what's not working, and that sets the stage for, of course, the next phase of the scoping. Okay, and again, 2 to 4 weeks. Implementation. This is the big bang. So in other words, is it going to be done in-house? Is it going to be contracted out? How is it going to be done? Huge logistics. In many cases at this particular phase, an owner may say, we only want to look at the mechanical, so we need a general contractor. Well, no, you don't. That's an added cost. If you're just dealing with the mechanical, it may be best just to get a mechanical contractor. So those are the logistical considerations. They may not seem much, but when you actually walk through the process and experience it, you realize that's extremely significant. So turnover phase. See, passing the baton is not apple turnover. So the point is, you know, this is where you're basically reiterating the whole process and, you know, revisit. This is what the owner asked for. Here's the documentation that we've, you know, accumulated. Here's the, you know, we've demonstrated that the issues have been addressed and corrected, and your building's, you know, tuned and functioning, and turn over all the information, and of course the critical understanding, you know, you have updated O&Ms, or you probably never had O&Ms, and you know, the personnel are trained, and they have the tools and wherewithal to maintain it. And of course, the continuous speech impediment there, continuous implementation. So again, you know, the considerations, what is the plan moving forward to maintain it? Is the facility engineer getting to retire and he has everything, you know, trapped up in his mind, and only he's the keeper of the keys? So of course, the graphic below, maintaining the investment. Documentation. I think another critical point is, you know, I've walked into rooms where there were drawings, specifications over the life of the building that were ankle deep in a room, and it wasn't neat at all. So, you know, one of the things to think about is some electronic filing and using the information as a part of the PM program. For example, O&M manuals electronic. You could click on a piece of equipment or a drawing that will take you to a PDF that has the O&M information. For systems manuals, that's exactly how we construct them. So it is really useful to operate and maintain the building. So very powerful. And again, it's sad, you know, for us when we go to that effort and it's in the bottom of somebody's filing cabinet, or you know, not being utilized properly, let alone not being utilized at all. So yes.
I'm going to have to interject for just 1 second. I think you're wrapping up anyhow, but just wanted to give you a reminder that some of our attendees will have to log off soon. So if you wanted to start Q&A, we could do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You beat me to the punch.
Oh, okay.
Just had a
right
couple
there.
slides, and that's fantastic. So
okay, perfect. Since we have a small group, I'm actually just going to try and unmute everyone, and you can ask your question directly. Or if you want to try and enter it into the question box, you can do that as well. But I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone now, so feel free to ask your question.
Hello? Yes.
yes, hello.
I have a question.
Be happy to answer it.
Is there any difference in the commissioning requirements between heating and cooling?
Between, I'm sorry, between what and what?
Heating, a building that's in a heating-dominated climate versus a building that's in a cooling-dominated climate.
Well, absolutely. You know, from a process standpoint, you know, I'm not sure I understand the question, because, you know, from a process standpoint, we're looking at the from a commissioning perspective, we look at the equipment function. For example, let's refer to new construction, the commissioning. We say, is it the right equipment? Is it the right capacity? Was this what was designed? Then we look at the function as the system and the interoperability. So, you know, when we're looking at the HVAC, we're looking at all modes of operation, and in fact, we could look at it as opposed to saying a cool climate or a warm climate. Certainly, we leave out the issue of the issue of humidity, but let's look at a warm climate, for example, and say, and we could take Las Vegas. A lot of people think that it's just hot all the time. No, we actually can hit points that are below freezing. So certainly we have the same considerations. I'll tell you the issue that we see most pervasively that's a problem are control sequences that just don't work. We could go through and do the commissioning, and we get done, and let's say we weren't involved in the design phase. We have a laundry list of issues, and everybody says, well, this should be working. You commissioned it. Yeah, well, we verified the function in accordance with the design documents, and it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, fail, So does that answer your question? Did I understand your question correctly?
It did. You answered it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, I think we have another question, and as a side note, I think I'm going to mute you all again since there was a lot of background noise. If you have a question, use the raise hand function, and I will unmute you. But I think I see a question from, I'm not sure how to pronounce, but I think it's Aileen? Aileen?
Oh, yes?
Yes, you can go ahead with your question.
Oh, I just was wondering if the presentation will be online or emailed.
Yes, I don't know if you caught it earlier, but we will be sending out a PDF of the slides.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll share this as well. Again, this is a tremendous amount of information to try and condense it into a short time. Well, I've got a wealth of information I'd be happy to share, and if anybody has questions about standards or what's developing or logistics. One of the things I'll say, commissioning or retrocommissioning isn't pixie dust. It requires that everybody be engaged, because if you think about it, if you had the most knowledgeable, incredible person in all respects on that project leading the commissioning and nobody's engaged, it can certainly be a problem, because let's look at commissioning. The construction, means and methods and schedule, that's the responsibility of the contractor. So, certainly nobody, including the owner, would be wise to try and, affect that from the commissioning standpoint. We deal with that all the time. All we can do is suggest to say, if you wait to address these issues, rather than addressing them in a systematic way, you're going to have a big bottleneck here, and come substantial completion, you're going to blow it. You're not going to address the issues. So there's a lot of logistics, and we know where the log jams are. This is what we see every day. Particularly with LEED, we see that some projects, the focus is on using the commissioning as a checklist, and it's shameful, because the ROI that can be achieved is substantial. As I said, for our experience, an ROI of 400%. In other words, we're returning 4 times more than our fee. And some of the things are subjective, but I'm saying in hard costs, we're able to show that. Certainly, we can't say avoiding, litigation. We could put a number to that. Those are, certainly issues, but we've quantified pretty objectively, working with owners, in excess of 2,300%. Now, just consider this. In this market, if you looked at it as a stock, if you got 15% return, it'd get anybody's attention. 25%, you'd probably be somebody's best friend. We're talking orders of magnitude, so there's gold here. I mean, this is really potent stuff. Good material.
Does anyone else have questions? I have a question, Richard. I was just wondering, are there common issues in very old buildings versus newer buildings? Like, are there big differences between the problems identified?
Yeah, certainly. You know, for example, you know, and I'll speak in specific terms. You know, and say Las Vegas or Phoenix. You know, buildings are quite new, and Las Vegas. You know, typically the estimated life expectancy of a building is about 20 years. Right off the bat, look at the East Coast. You know, say Baltimore or New Jersey. You know, as a state, New York City, these are some very, very, very old buildings. And the construction at the time, the considerations were very different. Certainly somebody brought up the issue of climate being different. But the logistics, you know, again, when we look at commissioning as a process, certainly the process remains unchanged. But you know, it's the logistics within the process and the, you know, the issues of emphasis that will change. Does that answer the question? In other words, you know, new buildings, you know, have different requirements, and older buildings, you know, were intended to be around a long time. Certainly. You know, for example, you have buildings with asbestos in them. We're certainly not designing that today, but there are issues. How do you work around that?
Okay.
Does that answer your question okay?
Yeah. In general, I was wondering, are there any specific items like, you know, HVAC or lighting that typically come up in very old buildings?
Yeah, older equipment, and in fact, we see a lot of older buildings where you know, the operators will just keep it working, and you know, we have much more efficient equipment today, much more efficient. So there's huge potential gains. And in older buildings, you know, again, the terminology issue, a lot of owners will say they want a facility condition assessment, or they'll say they want an energy audit. The question is, ultimately, sometimes you have to go farther and ask, what are you trying to achieve? Because sometimes they don't know how to ask for what it is they want. And since we're speaking to utility-oriented people, I can tell you, having dealt with utilities, you know, around the country, as an example, BGE, Baltimore Gas and Electric, has an incredible program. Wonderful people, knowledgeable people, and they have a great program. And I don't share that to make anybody feel bad. I think it's important to share the good things and let people know, hey, take a look at this. You know, if your utility hasn't got a program, look at the very best and try and draw from that. Of course, in the same region, PEPCO, and of course, you know, Nevada, we've got Southwest Gas, NV Energy, and of course, California, PG&E, SDG&E. And you know, they have phenomenal programs. I did a lecture for PGE up north, Northern California, many years ago. They had equipment that people were able to use to check out. For example, data logging equipment. I thought that was incredible. You know, so I try and share things like that to say, you know, reach out to people, you know, try and draw from the very best. And for example, BGE has information online. They have a pool of retrocommissioning companies to accomplish that, to go out into the community and help people tune their buildings and be the facilitator to work with the owners and the utility as a liaison so they can get these rebates. And I was thoroughly impressed, I have to say.
We have another question, I think
Sure.
from Georgianne Myers. I'm going to unmute you. Okay, you can go ahead with your question. Georgianne? No? Okay, well, maybe it was answered.
Okay. And any other questions or anything that you would like to know on behalf of any of the attendees?
I think that you've answered my questions. This is Lauren from SWEEP. But we are a little bit over our time, so we're going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you so much, Richard, for presenting. And thank you all for participating in our webinar. If you have lingering questions or comments, feel free to use the contact information in the presentation, which I will be sending you in the next couple of days.
And I thank you, Lauren, and everybody for attending and affording me the opportunity to share. So thank you.
Okay. So yeah, everyone, you can go ahead and sign off and have a great day.